Hello friends, welcome again. Today we will be discussing about some other types of networks. We looked at some categorizations in the previous module, but currently when you look at the current scenario, the networks have different types of networks are emerging, and we will be discussing about them today. And they are not confined to computers, as I said. Many devices other than computers connect to networks today. So, we will be discussing about three different types of nodes today. One is obviously sensor nodes, which you probably have found sensor nodes almost everywhere. The cars have them, air conditioners have them, vacuum cleaners almost everywhere. Washing machines also have lot of sensors. So, sensors are quite common today. So, the sensor network is one thing that we are going to talk about. The other thing that we are going to talk about is called home network, where the devices which communicate together with each other in the household case is also discussed. And the next category of networks that we would like to talk about is based on IoT or Internet of Things kind of device. The difference between a sensor node and a home node and an IoT is that this devices can connect to internet, can communicate to cloud, store information on the cloud, or take action based on some information that they retrieve from the cloud. So, these things are capable, they are capable of, and they are that is why they are able to take better decisions, they are be able to take more context aware decisions, and so on and so forth. So, that is why that they are in vogue, and we will be talking about IoTs at the end of this course. Last three modules we will be discussing about what IoT is and what are the challenges in building networks with the IoT devices as nodes and so on and so forth. So, we will be discussing that. So, anyway, but we will be introducing them here. One of the major movement today is called smart city. A smart city is something which can get its own data. For example, the amount of water that is flowing in the pipeline, the amount of people that travel using public transport from point A to point B, the amount of electricity that an XYZ citizen consumes every day, and so on and so forth. So, this information is going to help smart city in making decisions about what to do, how to do it better, how to save energy, how to prevent water leakages, and so on and so forth. So, these kind of systems demand networking of these devices. We will be throwing some light on those issues today. Okay. So, we will start with this thing networks. As I have already mentioned, network nodes are not confined to computers. Mobile phones, obviously, we do have, all of us have smartphones which connect to the internet, and they can act as good as any other computers. Okay. IoT devices I talked about, home networking sensors, our voice, the washing machines and air conditioners, all of them have sensors today. For example, all air conditioners have a temperature sensor. So, if you say that my temperature should be maintained at 18 degrees, then there is a sensor which looks at the temperature. If the temperature goes beyond a point, it will bring it back to 18, and then stays there for a while, and again it checks, and so on and so forth. So, that kind of thing happens in washing machine also. We will look at the amount of the automatic washing machines that we use in our daily life, looks at whether the water is dirty or not, the amount of clothes, the weight of these clothes, and so on and so forth. So, to make those decisions. So, those home networking sensors are also quite common today. And there are a lot of other use of such networks. For example, managing livestock. I talked about a case in Australia last time, managing ships. You do not need to move out of your hut, you just sit in your hut, look at your laptop, and you know where your ships are, because every ship has that identification tag attached to it. So, livestock, even jungles are being managed for habitat monitoring. People have made sure that the lions are being managed. There are networks which count number of lions in a jungle. You do not need to go and count actually, you can count with this simple devices which are attached to this animals. Okay. So, that is possible. RFID tags are very common. These are very small tiny devices you can attach to any object of your liking, maybe a cloth or some grocery item or something, and that will help you count them or manage them without really touching them from a remote place. So, that is possible. We will be discussing about that as well. Smart city is what is coming up today. I have already hinted about that, but suppose if I want to manage the water pipelines, I like to find out if there is a leakage. What I can do is I can just place sensors everywhere, and whenever there is a leakage, that pressure sensor will tell me that the pressure is less than what is required, and I can understand there has to be a leakage. So, what I can do is I can tell other operators to divert the water to some other place and stop the flow at that particular place. So, it will reduce the leakage. So, that kind of automation is possible in smart cities using this IoT devices. I will be throwing some light on that at the end of this session. Okay. IoT devices are nodes in such networks. They send information, they gather information, they take action, and they form an excellent solution to many problems that we face today by building a network, and that is the reason why we are talking about them. The nodes in case of sensor nodes, we will begin with sensor nodes. The sensor nodes are tiny devices, very small, maybe mobile, maybe stationary. Okay. For example, you probably have heard about Google's automated car. It will have 3 type of sensors. In fact, there are many sensors, but I have listed only 3 of them. Sensors which are designed to monitor environment. For example, a camera will look at the surrounding. Environment is the surrounding. What is happening around? If somebody, a pedestrian is crossing the road or whatever. Physical parameters like temperature of the car engine, if it is going above a required value, then you should not move the car, you should stop, or the pressure in the car tire, the speed of the car, and so on and so forth. So, these things are being monitored and reported back, and the decisions are made based on that. Okay. There are a lot of other sensor networks used, like bird's nest is being monitored in habitat monitoring, cameras recording in an automated car. So, later on if there is an accident, you will be able to know exactly what was the cause, okay, and who did it, whether it is the automated car's fault or the other party's fault. In the case of surveillance camera, the videos are recorded, and when it is IoT based, it is stored in the cloud, and you do not need a local storage. So, that is the biggest advantage of using an IoT device instead of a local device. Okay. They are also used to monitor fields for determining conditions of crops. You just find out what is the condition, and exactly the amount of water that is needed. You can find out the exact amount of water, and you can test the soil and decide that moisture level and decide the amount of water to be provided. So, that you can do that actually. So, such things are being done already, that they are there in, okay, and so on. So, amount of fertilizer needed and all that can be calculated and provided. Sensor network is also used in battlefields to monitor enemy activities and industrial and consumer. Many applications use them. The hundreds of applications where sensor nodes have found their place. Okay. Smart bulbs is one thing, like you may be surprised why you need a smart bulb, but just consider a huge building, your own college or your own office, where there are hundreds of rooms, and your clerk needs to monitor where each bulb is, and if a bulb has gone off, you need to replace that bulb. Now, you do not need to do it manually if these bulbs are smart and they can report about their own status. So, sitting on your own desktop, you will be able to determine which bulbs are on and which bulbs are off, and in fact, a little smarter will tell you that it is going to complete its life soon. So, you can replace it before it does so. So, that is possible. And okay, so a lot of other things like preventing and controlling fire in jungle and pollution. Now, pollution is also very critical today. The sensors will be able to measure these pollutants and report that information back, and such things are able to help even in smart cities, where you will have to provide the transportation in such a way that will avoid this polluted areas and so on and so forth. Though these things are anyway happening, and these type of networks are quite different than what the other networks that we talked about. They have very different types of challenges and all that. So, we will be discussing about them in last 3 modules 34, 5 and 6 modules, okay, and so on. Okay. Ad hoc networks that we did mention about, which are collection of mobile devices like smartphones and laptops, they are communicating with each other, and we say that they are quite resource constrained networks, but when you talk about sensor networks, they are much more resource constrained than the ad hoc networks, and here are some differences listed. Major differences are the power and the memory that you can have, the processing power and the memory. Okay. And many a times it is not possible for you to recharge this sensor devices, and that is the reason. For example, if an implantable medical device is inserted in a patient's body, you can't just take it out and recharge and then again insert inside a patient's body. You cannot do it. So, you will have to find out the protocols that you use, in fact, the communication process that you use must be able to conserve energy as much as it can. Now, this is a very big challenge, okay, and that is possible. In fact, people have worked are working on such things, and there are very good solutions to those things are possible. Okay. Home networks are on the horizon. In fact, there are some solutions already there, but not yet commercially available. There are some reasons, but anyway, for example, here are some examples that I have listed. Your refrigerator, when you open and try to pick up something, your refrigerator will tell you that you are eating more than what you should. Okay. You may like or not like, it is possible, the technology is there for you to do it. Okay. Your front door camera telling you that your friend, okay, you are there in the office, your front door camera at your house will tell you that your friend has arrived to your place. So, you can tell that lock to open and allow him in, kind of. Okay. And a bedroom camera will tell you that your babysitter is not doing her job and she is taking a nap, kind of. Okay. So, that is also possible. Your spectacle or car keys or something will remind you where they are. Now, these are common problems. So, you just look for it and will beep from somewhere and you know that is there. So, such networks have their own typical advantage, basically helping people better managing their home. Okay. So, that kind of network are designed for such thing. Okay. For example, switching lights off and having music played which is of your liking and so on and so forth. And interesting, the last example that I have written here is very interesting. When your house is on fire, the sensor node will sense it, will try to douse fire by doing something if it can open a valve of your water tank and make sure the water flows and so on and so forth, that is fine, but if it cannot do it, it can actually call the fire department directly. Now, if that for doing that you will have to have the internet connection, that makes it more capable of, but that is possible. Okay. Smart city networks, the next category of networks that would like to talk about. That network is basically a network of IoT devices, and that is embedded in, for example, is embedded in water pipelines. What's the advantage of having this? It can measure and bill citizens for amount of water they consume. Now, this is something which many people wanted, but that has never been practical, but this is possible with smart city. Okay. Instruct the government officers to manage water levels. You know that the water is being consumed at this rate, what the amount of water that we need till the next monsoon, you can always know, okay, and you can tell the city authorities that you are going to run out of water soon. So, make alternate arrangement. So, they should not wake up only when the calamity arises, they should know well in advance. So, that is possible if this is being done. Okay. Okay. Provide some estimation of amount of water needed in a specific case, then you know that if in this particular area the amount of water that you need next month will be of this type of this volume based on your own past data analysis and all that. So, such things are possible if you have this data. such things are possible if you have this network in place. We will give you all this data and you will be able to churn that data and get the decision making solution out of it. Another area where such smart city networks are quite useful is called power grid networks. Now, those power grid networks do a huge thing for us as a consumer as well. So, as a consumer I know that what I am consuming, the amount of electricity that I am consuming. These smart meters will not only be able to report back to the government about my consumption, will also report me, and I know that what I am consuming. And many cases the electricity companies are charging customers on the basis of the time. For example, at a critical period of time, evening 6 to night 10, maximum amount of electricity is being consumed. So, some electricity company says that if you consume electricity during this period, this peak period, you will be charged more. Okay. So, the devices, the automated devices will find out. For example, if I start my washing machine, it will tell that okay, this is the high consumption time slot. So, if you start half an hour later, it will be cheaper. Okay. How my washing machine could do it? It has a sensor built in, is basically an IoT device, communicate with the cloud, get the rates of the IoT, this electricity company rates, the time slots, and measure all this, and then makes a decision. Now, that network that kind of networking can help that kind of decision making process. So, that is the point here that I wanted to suggest. In fact, it is also possible for customers to produce their own electricity and also share with others. Now, in fact, there is something called IoE, Internet of Energy, okay, energy devices basically. So, that network can manage this energy. Okay. So, how that is done is a little complicated, but point is we have a network, we have these IoT devices, they communicate to each other and then they provide solutions which can help us live better. That is the point. Okay. And this networks we call smart city networks. What is the cost? If you talk about the smart city or home network, cost is one of the very critical factor. If I have a refrigerator, for example, if I want to buy a refrigerator, I get in 15,000 rupees, and if I want to get an internet enabled or smart freeze will cost me 20,000 rupees. People will think twice before sending before spending 5,000 more. What is the advantage that I get? We have smart TVs today, a lot of smart TVs are there in place, but people do not buy smart TVs because it costs more. Okay. So, that is one thing. Okay. Cost is prohibitively expensive in some cases. User experience, if you have an internet enabled kind of a system which needs to shut down and start, okay, we are quite used to, people who use computers are quite used to those problems, and whenever we come across that problem we shut down things and we restart, and most often the problem vanishes. That kind of a thing won't work in conventional consumer domain. Okay. People won't expect devices to malfunction like this. Okay. Robustness, city devices needs to be very robust. Home network, you will take care of your own appliance, you have paid for it, but for a city urban area where the sensors are deployed, obviously citizens won't take care of those sensors as much as they do for their own house. So, that is the other issues. Lot of other technical issues, backward compatibility issues. I bought a device which is latest and you had a device which is of the earlier version, so they do not talk to each other properly, so on and so forth. We face these problems in computer people, and we know that these are very difficult problems to handle, and they are not going to vanish. Okay. They are going to be there, and the users will have to learn to deal with those problems. That is going to be hard. Security obviously is a very critical thing, but then security, let me tell you, there is a difference here. When there is a banking system hacked and my 50,000 rupees are stolen, that is really bad, but that I can accept. But if somebody hacks into my insulin pump remotely and inject 10 times the dose that I use is going to kill me. Now, that is altogether a different thing. Please understand that this is something called physio, this thing, cyber realm, where it is not only cyber realm that attackers can attack, now they can attack the physical realm as well, because they are now connected. So, security becomes paramount importance today, that when you use this network. So, these are all challenges. Okay. The other thing is, people expect home devices to continue functioning for years without real maintenance, and no computer program can do that, we all know. Okay. Wireless solutions are less robust. We will have to have wireless solutions, and we know wireless solutions have their own problem of bandwidth and all those. We will be looking at those issues later. There are many protocols proposed, Zigbee and 6LoWPAN. We will be looking at this too later. In last 3 modules, we will be actually specifying, we will be talking about these protocols. But then there is not one single solution, there are multiple solutions, they are all incompatible, and there is no standard which is the de facto or de jure standard yet. These are all challenges. And customers' mindset is always the case. Customers, like our computer customers, for example, if my Microsoft Office starts malfunctioning, I will not go and sue Microsoft or Bill Gates for doing that. But if my refrigerator door remains ajar, I will do that. I will tell the company that take the refrigerator back or replace, I do not care. That kind of mindset, if that kind of mindset, okay, when you provide an internet based device, provide that device to that customer, is going to be a hard job for them to accept with the mindset that they have with this thing. Home versus city network is also very critical point. Home networks and city networks, as I said, they are quite similar, but then there are differences. The biggest difference is of scale, is a huge thing. Smart cities are huge things, thousands of nodes. Just take one case, suppose if you want to cover the entire city with all surveillance cameras, every crossroad will have 4 cameras, and assume that every camera captures 10 MB per second, and you have 400 crossroads. Calculate that, 400 into 4 into 10 MB per second, you will get huge amount of data, and that is going to continue coming to you, and you are not going to stop. And you will have to stop, you will have to process that data that fast. Okay, it is a huge thing. Okay. And in home network, there is no likelihood of mismatching here. If I have a good router, I will get a better laptop, and so on and so forth. I will not have a very old router, I will not buy a very old router and get a very high end laptop, is never going to happen. But in city, it is quite possible. One department does not have budget, so they buy old or slow devices, and other department has faster devices, and there is going to be mismatch. So, these problems do occur, okay. And city networks might have heterogeneous types of devices, will have trouble talking to each other, they may use different types of protocols, and these things are going to happen. And the care, obviously, city devices need to be more fault tolerant, okay. And when the data is huge and you need to process that data that fast, demand something called big data solutions. I am not talking about big data, and you better pick up some other course if you want to learn about big data, but you can see that is quite related. The amount of data is huge, the amount of data is coming from various devices, and there is no structure in most of the cases, and is continuously coming. Okay. So, is this called big data? That is very hard problem to solve. Okay, friends, next thing is RFID based networks. As I said, RFID is very small device, you can attach that thing with any object, will act as a network. Okay. And there is another device called reader. So, whenever any object with the tag comes into the vicinity of a reader, reader will take that data. For example, if the shirt has an RFID tag attached to it, wherever the shirt is, the reader will be able to take a note of it. So, that is the power. You can take the complete stock without picking up any item of the inventory. So, that is something which is possible to be done. There are a lot of areas in which this is applied. In fact, there are databases which are possible to manage actually. So, this RFID information can directly go to a database. Oracle provides that service, and I believe that all other database vendors provide such a service. And how communication between tags and devices happen? Okay. There are two types of tags available. One is called passive RFID and the other one is active RFID. Passive RFID, the RFID does not have battery of its own. The reader, when communicates with it, with the radio frequency, it charges it. So, it will get that, it will just send that data back. So, those passive RFID tags are better in the sense that you do not have a battery. So, you do not worry about the power and you also have the cost down. So, that is the advantage. Okay. So, that thing is explained here, and readers have multiple antennas. So, what reader can do? They can talk to multiple RFID devices at the single go, and there are three different types of frequencies that they use. One is 900 megahertz, that is in US, and 400 megahertz in our case region 2, we belong to this region. The other one is high frequency, which is 14 megahertz. Okay. This is higher end, but this is very short range, but quite good, and many devices like driving licenses are coming with RFID tags now. So, what you need to do, like you do not need to show your passport, okay, and driving license to anybody. It will be, so when you pass through that phase, driving license information is recorded or the passport information is recorded. That kind of corporate I cards also have them now. So, that is happening. Low frequency RFID is one of the biggest advantage of low frequency RFID, that the distance is huge. So, these livestock and all that, okay, they use this because they do not need to send a lot of information. Disadvantage of low frequency RFID tag is they can not send a huge amount of information, they can send very small, but when you only need an ID, for example, every sheep in a farm contains an ID, you will just collect that thing and you know how many ships are around and which ship is where. So, that kind of possibility is there with RFID tags. Okay. An assembly line product like automobile, here are some examples, clothes, livestock, in the human body. Okay. But then people, when this happens in human body, in some cases this has been done to people who are jailed. So, you can track them without actually finding out them, but then people have raised privacy and security concerns. I do not know whether it is being still practiced, but I heard about this thing happening. So, even people have been inserted with RFID tags for remotely monitoring them. Okay. And they are replacing barcode at many places, and like books in the library, you do not need to, again you do not need to bring that device near to that barcode reader. It is done from a remote place, you do not need to move around. The only advantage of barcode that it is cheaper, but everything else is in favor of the RFID tag. Okay. IoT devices is little better than the home network devices and sensor nodes, and provides two-way communication. That is why they are better. I gave enough examples for you to understand the usefulness of IoT devices. Okay. They can actually they can store information in the cloud, that they can take information. They are very smart devices, smart home devices, smart city devices. Okay. Can also generate power. For example, I can have a band here will monitor my blood pressure and so many other things, will also be powered from my body temperature. So, it is called autocry. Okay. Autarky, sorry. Autarky is able to take the power from the environment. So, that is possible. Okay. Is basically an IoT device is a miniature computer. It is a little better than sensor node. Will have almost everything. Okay. It can act as an agent for others, and here are some examples. This is one very good example. Conventional surveillance camera that you look at will only monitor, okay, and send the video back. If there is a crime happening, the surveillance camera cannot do anything. But current surveillance camera with IoT and AI built in, what they can do is, in fact, you can provide what are normal sequences and what are normal objects that you see on a camera. So, if there is an abnormal object, for example, somebody is moving around with knife, you will be able to, that surveillance camera will be able to detect that this is something which is abnormal and can report back. Not only it can report back, when it finds that this is serious, will be able to write to the cloud, and cloud will, then there is a software available there which can decide which is the police one nearby, looking at the geographic location of that, and can even let that police communicate to that surveillance camera to find out the exact location, and then even GPS is roped in to make sure police when is directed to that place where the crime is happening or about to happen. So, that kind of a thing is possible. Okay. But then the disadvantage obviously is that if this information is leaked, there are problems. Okay. There are some issues, deployment and economical issues, how you deploy IoT devices and who will pay. Okay. Okay. They are not context aware, and now context awareness to some extent is possible, but if you are more context aware, the power is that you will be able to take context based decision. For example, if the sensor is implanted in boiler, the temperature range is different, but if the sensor is implanted in human body, the temperature range is different. If you know what is the context, in fact, the same company who is producing sensors for boilers will produce sensors for human and will going to work looking at the context. That kind of a sophistication does not exist yet. Okay. And I have already talked about these issues here. Smart cities, in fact, I talked about most of the things that water management system, electricity system, network services I talked about. So, I am just keeping the slides now. Okay, some of here are critical. I have talked about this, but then pollution control system will be able to tell you vehicular congestion levels and the pollution levels, and will help you divert the traffic to zones which are not polluted or less polluted in a city. Home energy management systems can do wonders. I have talked about this as well. One very critical thing you may find is government hospitals can keep track of patients who are discharged from the hospital. They can remotely look after those patients, for example, temperature of a patient and the functioning of kidney and so on and so forth, by making sure those implantable devices talk to patient's mobile phone, and that patient's mobile phone communicate to the cloud, and the hospital server taking that information from the cloud and look at or make decisions about that patient's health. Okay. So, those things are possible. And I have told you that there is a need for big data, okay. And why? The amount of data is huge and demand broadband connectivity. So, people are, some authors, some people who have wrote papers say that 5G is the technology for IoT. Okay. Local processing abilities and convergence of information from other network is a big challenge. Okay. For example, if there is an accident somewhere, you need to inform police, you need to inform hospital, you need to inform your insurance agency and all that. So, these different networks in a smart city case is to be done automatically. So, you need to actually talk to other networks as well. Okay. Okay. So, you need this information to store, you need the infrastructure to process all this. So, is a huge challenge. And ubiquitous computing is also needed. Ubiquitous computing means that you will be able to access these services from the any place of the city. Now, that is not easy. Okay. So, the coverage, and you should make sure that every citizen is getting the benefit, and the coverage of such network should be everywhere. Okay. Okay. And this accident example that I was talking about is here. So, you will have to make sure all these networks, every stakeholder is to be informed appropriately. In fact, it is also possible to identify who the person who is injured, and if he is unconscious, you should look at the database, find out who is the nearest relative, and should also inform automatically. You know, that kind of a system is possible with all this smart city solutions, but think of the amount of networking infrastructure and the data that you need to chunk. Okay. With that note, I conclude this particular module. We looked at few other types of networks than the conventional networks that you probably have seen across, but mind well, these networks are going to come, you probably after few years probably these networks will be there in place, we will be using them. So, it is not all that too far. We will discuss 4 different types actually. One is sensor nodes, second is home network device, third one which is a combination of 2, but something which can talk to internet IoT based, and the fourth one is RFID based. Okay. RFID, in fact, the biggest advantage of RFID is that you do not need any internet connectivity in the object that you would like to trace. You just attach that RFID tag, will add that facility. So, that is the reason why RFID is little more attractive. And IoT devices are also used in building smart cities, where there are plenty of challenges, and there are, and when there are plenty of challenges, it is good for people who are learning all this, because they will be able to find solutions to those problems and learn a lot of new things from it, and even earn a lot of money out of solving these problems. So, that is absolutely great thing to have. With that note, I would like to stop, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you all.